Hi there, my name's Connor Diblin and thank you so much for joining me on the Dr. Diblin YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking through all things UCAT. We're going to be talking through the different sections of the exam, the timing and the score breakdown, the number of questions in each section, and then we're going to do a little tip on each section. If you find this video useful, please like, comment and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Let's get stuck in. So what is the UCAT exam? In the UK, to sit undergraduate medicine, you've got to first take one of two exams. You've got to take the UCAT exam or the BMAT exam. Now, the majority of the UK medical schools want you to sit the UCAT exam, and then there's a small handful who demand the BMAT. The UCAT, which stands for University Clinical Aptitude Test, was previously called the UKCAT, so that was the United Kingdom Clinical Aptitude Test. They changed their name in 2019 to try and encourage more international uptake of the exam, and since then Australia and New Zealand have also swapped from their previous UMAT to the UCAT ANZ. So if you're from Australia or New Zealand, this applies entirely to you as well. So what makes up the UCAT exam? The UCAT exam has 5 different sections. First of all, you've got the verbal reasoning, the quantitative reasoning, the abstract reasoning and the decision making, and those 4 sections are all scored on a number-based system that goes from 300 to 900. The 5th section is called the Situational Judgement Test, and that's scored in bands, so you can get a score of one of 4 bands, 4 being the lowest and band 1 being the highest. Every year the UCAT Consortium, which is the governing body for the UCAT exam, releases last year's previous average grades. So the verbal reasoning section had an average grade of 565. The decision-making section of the exam had an average grade of 618. The quantitative reasoning section of the exam had an average grade of 662, which was the highest of any section. And the abstract reasoning section had an average score of 638. So all of that together put the whole average grade for the numbered section, for those first 4 sections, at 620.75. And then the average grade for the SJT, the Situational Judgement Test, was band 2. In terms of what a good UCAT or previously UKCAT grade looks like, anything above 660 is really good on the UCAT and is probably enough to apply for the majority of UK medical schools. And then anything above 700 is really fantastic. So let's have a look at each of those 5 sections in a bit more detail. We'll talk through the question style and what they're asking, how much time you have to answer the number of questions, and then I'll give you a little tip on each section. Let's start with the verbal reasoning section of the exam. This section is 21 minutes long with a 1-minute read time at the start, and in that time you've got to answer 44 questions. As I said previously, the average score for 2019 on the verbal reasoning section was 565. So the question style for the verbal reasoning section of the exam. In the verbal reasoning, you'll be presented with 11 passages of text, and each of those will be followed by 4 questions. The questions in the verbal reasoning section come in 2 styles. Firstly, you have the true, false, can't tell questions. And that's where they give you a statement based off of information in the text, and it's your job to work out whether that statement is true, false, or that you can't tell based on the information provided in that text. The second style of question in this section is where you must choose the most appropriate statement from a list of options, and you'll be given a list of 4 options in that case. The verbal reasoning section of the exam is there to test your critical reasoning, your literacy skills, and your ability to infer from the text. So you're going to be asked to infer meaning and make deductions based on the information provided for you in the passages. This personally was my hardest section, it's where I performed the worst, and it's commonly the hardest section for most people. So my number 1 tip for the verbal reasoning section of the exam is to not start each question by reading the full passage of text. You want to read the title of the text, then have a look at the questions. If there are any true, false, or can't tell questions, then you want to start off by trying to answer all of those and then save up all of your time left over for answering the ones that require you to read the full passage of text. If you haven't read the questions before you're reading the text, you have no idea what you're looking for, so you're never going to find it. So secondly, we're going to talk about the quantitative reasoning section. You have 24 minutes to answer 36 questions, plus that 1 minute of reading time at the start. The quantitative reasoning section of the exam is typically quite a high scoring section. So in 2019, candidates scored an average score of 662. So the question style for the quantitative reasoning section of the exam, you'll be given 9 sets of data, and each of those sets of data will be followed by 4 questions. Those sets of data could be in the forms of tables, it could be graphs, diagrams, or charts. All of the questions in the quantitative reasoning section will give you an option of 5 answers, and only one of those will be correct. So the quantitative reasoning section of the exam is there to test a candidate's ability to make numerical and data-driven decisions and to test their problem-solving skills. I know a lot of people worry that their maths is not good enough to sit a quantitative reasoning section of an exam, but really they're only asking you to have GCSE level maths, and then the rest of it is your problem-solving skills. My number one tip for the quantitative reasoning section of the exam is to get used to using that on-screen calculator and try and do as much of it as you can in your head or just using a whiteboard, so you're not trying to waste time clicking different buttons on the screen. Try and get used to doing simple calculations like a percentage to a fraction conversion, and that should put you in good stead for the exam. So the third section we're going to talk about in the UCAT exam is going to be the abstract reasoning. In this section you've got 13 minutes to answer 55 questions, so it's quite tight. You still have that 1 minute reading time at the start. For the abstract reasoning, in 2019 people got an average of 638. So what are they asking in the quantitative reasoning section? There are 4 different types of question in the quantitative reasoning, and we're going to talk through each of them. So firstly is one I call categories. In the categories section, you're going to be given 2 sets of data. It's going to be symbols in set A and symbols in set B. Then you're going to be given a single test object or shape, and you've got to say whether that fits into set A, set B, or neither of them. The second type of question in the abstract reasoning section of the UCAT exam is a series. So you'll be given a series of shapes and then an array of options, and you've got to choose the correct one that comes next in that series. The third type of question in this section is the statements. So you're going to be given a series of shapes which complete a statement, and that statement is incomplete. And so you've got to choose from the options which shape will complete that statement. The fourth and final type of question in the abstract reasoning section of the UCAT exam is the sorting. So it's very similar to the categories in that you're going to have a set A and a set B of shapes already there, but this time you're going to be given an array of shapes, and you've got to decide whether each one falls into A or B, and there won't be a neither option in this section. My number one tip for the abstract reasoning section of the exam is to get used to those different styles of questions. Know what each one is going to ask and start to work out what each one is going to be looking for. In the abstract reasoning section of the exam, they are looking to test your creativity, your problem solving, and your pattern recognition. So it's going to be really important that you get used to trying to ignore sections of the shapes because they deliberately put in information that isn't pertinent to the question. So the fourth section we're going to talk about from the UCAT is a decision-making section. In this section, you're going to have 31 minutes to answer 29 questions. So you've got almost a minute per question. You also have that 1 minute read time at the start. So for the decision-making section of the exam, in 2019, people got an average score of 618. What kind of questions are you going to be asked in the decision-making section of this exam? Each of those 29 questions is going to come with its own data set, and that's going to be followed by one of 2 questions. Either you're going to be given 5 statements, and you have to say whether each one of them is true or false to get the 1 mark for that question. And alternatively, you'll be given 4 options and you have to choose which one is correct. My number one tip for the decision-making section of this exam is to take your time. You've got 31 minutes to answer all 29 questions, which is almost a minute per question. So really take your time to read through that data and don't get caught up in any double negatives. The fifth and final section we're going to talk about in the UCAT exam is the Situational Judgement Test, or SJT. In this section, you're going to have 26 minutes to answer 69 questions, which will each relate to about 22 scenarios. So each of those scenarios can have up to 5 following questions. You're also going to have that 1 minute of read time at the start to get ready for it. Unlike the other 4 sections of the UCAT exam, the Situational Judgement Test is marked on bands. So that goes from 1 being the highest down to 4 being the lowest. And band 2 was the average grade for everyone taking it in 2019. You're going to be presented with 22 different scenarios. Each one can have up to 5 questions following it. These scenarios are going to be real-world examples of things that could happen to you or things you might experience. And the questions are going to be designed to test how you're going to react to those. So in the SJT section of the exam, you're going to be presented with 3 different styles of question. The first one is where you're presented with 4 possible actions following a scenario, and you've got to work out the appropriateness or the importance of each of those. The next style of question, you'll also be presented with 4 possible actions, and you've got to rank those from the most appropriate to the least appropriate. The last style of question will present you with 3 options, and you've got to choose the most and the least appropriate from those. The situational judgment test part of the UCAT exam is very similar to the situational judgment test that 5th year medical students have to sit, which then determines where they're placed for their foundation year programmes. My number 1 tip for the situational judgment test section of the UCAT exam is to remember that you're not being asked to provide medical or scientific knowledge here. You might be asked to provide some professionalism or ethical insight, but really they're asking you what you would do in this scenario. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, please like and comment. And if you think you're going to find this channel helpful, please subscribe and share with your friends. Thanks so much.